Today's video will be covering FoxFury's latest release, their breakthrough series of right-angle lights, the BT2 and BT3. These are purpose-built tools, especially designed for firefighters to help them in during impaired visions through smoke. So as such, they do feature SMO-KUT technology because of the tight beam profiles. So the BT2, the numbers in each model simply represents the beam angle. So BT2 features a 2-degree beam angle and the BT3 a 3-degree beam angle. They do also feature requirements that meets the National Fire Protection Association, which means that it's fire resistant up to 500 degrees Fahrenheit or 260 degrees Celsius for at least 30 minutes. It's also waterproof to 10 feet and 3 meters. I will cover the rest of these features as I get into digging into the lights. They arrived in these cardboard boxes with plastic cutout windows to display the product, and amongst the accessories that were included were a door witch, which I'll actually get into a little bit later, and as well as these carbiner and a keychain ring that can clip over here. So digging into these lights, right? Again, these are purpose-built tools. Probably not something, more of a traditional light that a flashaholic is accustomed to seeing. But again, that's not the primary demographics of these lights. They again were designed for firefighters. So as such, fairly strong, sturdy construction. Right off the bat, you feel these are very, very solid lights. The plastic is fairly thick all around, not just at the head, but as well as the interior, which I will just pop open this door. Applies a little downward pressure. There's a metal hinge here for the battery carrier. The battery carrier itself is also fairly stocky. Now, these lights currently run off of AA batteries, and specifically the cutouts here were designed intentionally tight such that only alkalines fit. As you can see, that is a very, very tight fit. There's almost no room. I've tried Eneloops, I've tried various nickel metal hydride batteries, rechargeable batteries in my arsenal, but none of them would actually fit in here. And again, that was intentional. Now, FoxFury has mentioned they will eventually be releasing rechargeable 18650s for the lights. I don't know the exact time frame, but I will include that in my written review. But as we peer down the tube of the light, you will see that there are actually 4 prongs, right? So those 2 outer prongs actually correspond with AA batteries and completes that path, whereas the 2 in the middle there will eventually accommodate the 18650s. All right. Now you'll see there's an O-ring here to help with water resistance, and there is this groove here that aligns with the battery carrier such that you don't make a mistake of inserting it in the wrong way. However, of course, you do have to be mindful of inserting the batteries in the correct polarity. Alright, so let me just get these in there. Shove this back in, and there is, again, a little metal latch here that corresponds with this groove to lock up the battery carrier. Now, it does require a decent amount of force to put back on, but once in, feels very, very solid and secure. Alright, so as you can see, there is a very deep reflector. The BT2, as far as I can tell, utilizes a XP LED emitter. I'll try to get a close-up shot of that. I'm a little distracted right now trying to get a focus of it, but hopefully you should be able to see that, although I can't really zoom in much. I'll try to see if I could zoom in a little bit more and still stay focused. Okay, so that's about it, but again, I will have close-up shots in my written review. Now, zooming back out, the main on-off switch is on the side here, right? And I think it's actually great because regardless if you're left-handed or if you're right-handed, it's easily accessible at a good gripping angle here. All right. Now on the back, there is a stainless steel plate here again, cut out for the keychain ring. It's bolted onto the plate. This plate actually acts in a way, if I'm not mistaken, to conduct the heat away from the driver that actually sits right behind here, which I'll get into in a second. But to wrap this up, there's a little clip here, so I suppose when you clip it onto your turnout coat, or meaning for firefighters, or on your belt, it won't just come loose. And they thoughtfully put a little bottle opener here to pop open your cold beverage of choice after a hard day's worth of work. Now, before we get into the rest of the light, these two prongs here actually are the recharge contact points. I did check to see whether or not I could get a voltage out of it with the alkalines installed, and I don't get a reading. So again, I assume it's strictly related to the 18650 circuitry. If and whenever they release that, and if I should happen to get that for testing, I'll be sure to update my review. Alright, now digging into the light itself, the reflector, or at least the outer bezel, is removable. And again, as you will see, it is fairly thick. Although I don't believe I've actually been able to get the reflector itself removed. If I'm not mistaken, I measure the inner diameter here at 54.6 millimeters, which translates roughly into, I think, 2.15 inches. Okay, so now should be able to get a nice close-up of the emitter as well as the driver. And as you can see, the driver itself is situated on top of this heatsink, and as mentioned, if I'm not mistaken, it actually does a fairly good job of transferring that heat out. During my runtime testing, I had the probe inserted in there, and if I'm not mistaken, I didn't use a fan on the BT2 run, and it hit as high as close to 160 degrees Fahrenheit. And on the BT3 initially I did use a fan, but I will be reconducting it without it, and for the BT3 run it was about roughly 140 degrees Fahrenheit. So again, based upon that, I feel that it does do a fairly good job of transmitting the heat out of the light. Okay. Now I'm going to put this back on. We get to the meaty bits of going through the UI, which stands for user interface. Get a plain sheet of white paper here, and something for the light to focus on, which is typically my Pathfinder watch. Okay, so now the light is activated through a main on-off switch. Although initially in the manufacturer specs it was mentioned that there is but a high, low, and a strobe mode, I actually found that there was 3 modes, at least on these 2 samples I was sent. There's actually a high, medium, and low, as well as a strobe. Now a simple click on will activate the light. Let me get that out of the way so you can actually see that very tight beam profile. I've measured the lux of these two. I think the BT2, which I'm holding right now, came in at roughly 35K lux at 1 meter, and the BT3 came in at 34K, so very close. Even though, as we all know, the BT3 uses an XML emitter, and those typically have a more floody profile, but yet due to the reflector and just the sheer output, it was able to nearly match this in throw. Alright, so the UI, you have to press and hold. Unfortunately, it's a little bit lengthy, I feel, if I'm not mistaken, for 7 seconds or so, between 3 to 7 seconds. So you can see it goes through high, medium, low, and then strobe. But it does take a fair amount of time to cycle through. I've been told that FoxFury will be updating the UI such so that they will reduce the time it takes to cycle through these modes. Now in terms of memory, I'm going to shut this off, give it a few seconds, turn it back on. Doesn't seem like the last use mode is memorized. As you can see, I left it off in medium. It's going cycling through high, medium, low again. So I suppose that makes sense, because again, you figure if you're in an emergency situation, you're responding to a firefighter, and now I'm not a firefighter by any means, so I can't really speak to the conditions involved, but I'd imagine that you would want your brightest output available immediately. So And one other thing that's worth mentioning about the lights is that in FoxFury typically caters to, like I said, firefighters, first responder, law enforcement. So they intentionally design their lights to not be regulated because they want to give the user ample warning that, hey, look, your output is dimming significantly. You should have advance warning to swap out the batteries ahead of time. You wouldn't want a regulated light to just suddenly cut out during an emergency situation. So as such, again, these lights are not regulated. Right? So that covers the BT2. The BT3 does feature, as mentioned, a wider profile, but also much higher output. So I did measure the BT2 to be roughly 240 lumens versus the claim output by FoxFury at 200 lumens. And for the BT3, I came in at, I think, 700 lumens versus 600 quoted by FoxFury. Now, as you can see, the BT3 does have a slightly wider beam profile, but not overly so. So here they are side by side. Just want to make sure I'm at the same level here. Okay, and as you can see, it's not too far off. The BT2 does feature a cooler profile temperature for the light, whereas the BT3, although on the camera it looks a little bit greenish, but my eyes, the camera's on auto white balance, so my eyes do not really see it's that green as it's showing on the camera right now. Alright, same interface, press and hold, and I'll cycle through high, medium, low, and then strobe. Now strobe is actually a fairly slow rate. It's not a typical high frequency. I unfortunately never got my oscilloscope set up, so I don't really know what that frequency is, but suffice to say it's not super fast. Now, to give you an idea of how tight this profile is, here's FoxFury's Rook Checkmate. It does feature XML T6, but as you can see, it's a decent size head for a single 18650 light, but by comparison, that beam is not quite as tight. And if I remember correctly, I measured this to be roughly 8600 K lux at 1 meter. So as you can see, the BT series of lights do produce very, very tight beams. And I have no doubts that it should perform fairly well, although again, I would love to get this out to a firefighter that I'm collaborating with on this review for some real world testing. I don't know how that will turn out, but I will update my written review as I get to that. Now, previously mentioned, there is this wedge here, right? And this is to secure doors. I guess as you're going through a entrance and you want to make sure that that door stays open, you simply pop that out, wedge it into the door. Typically, if I'm not mistaken, it's wedged into the door jamb and not actually traditionally as the door stoppers are underneath the door. So, and to get that on, it's simply held on through friction, through this ledge here, and you simply press it on. And that's actually fairly brilliant because in doing some research about that, I actually came across some examples. I'm actually going to find that on my iPad and show it here. So for instance, this is found on the vententersearch.com website. This was actually submitted by firefighter Ryan Marshuser, and apologies in advance if I've mispronounced that, but as you can see, his way to attach the wedge is actually clipped on through here. And the great thing about this particular setup is that it's literally breakaway, so in case you get snagged or something like that, it will break away. But as you can see, I guess it's not as compact as this setup here, where the wedge is incorporated directly onto the light, and you could just prop it off when you need it, wedge it into the door, and I guess retrieve and plop it back in when you're done. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a good high-level summary of these lights and their capabilities. I will have a full outdoor comparison coming up soon with my camping trip, as well as the written review, and hopefully that'll give you a complete picture of what these lights are capable of, especially, like I said, if I can get to completing the joint collaboration with the firefighter. So as part of, again, closing, part of FCC disclosures, these lights were provided by FoxFury for review. Thanks for watching.